what I expected to receive was a lot of people calling me a nut job. And that hurts to have that said about you. That said, over the year and a half of doing this, my skin has gotten quite thick as to what people want to say about me. And that's kind of what I want to go into in this segment a little bit here. But at first, God, I had the worst, most cruel things imaginable said to me. I mean, if you want to see some of them, just go to my YouTube channel, Alienphotog, and just read through the comments. And they're funny to me now, but at the time they were really hurtful because in a lot of ways I was still trying to figure out what in the hell was going on. It's very difficult being an abductee because what a lot of people don't understand about alien abductions, who've not been through them, and even a lot of people who have been through them, is that they are very, 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 very rarely a one-time deal. That hardly ever happens. They're usually an ongoing series of abductions. Almost always. Almost always. The memories from those abductions can be entirely erased. How they do this, whether they've got some sort of wand or something that deletes the memory, I don't know. I do know I've been through the same thing where you know something has happened. You know it has to do with aliens, and then little memories start coming back. A lot of times people just tend to know in their gut they've been abducted. I get the most interesting emails from abductees. It's the most interesting group of people. It really is, because the emails I get from people go into extremely great detail as to these extensive abductions, their experiences. They almost always start in the childhood and then become more dramatic later in life. And they'll go on and on and on about every single little detail. And then at the end, there'll often be a line saying something to the effect of, I'm not sure if this happened or not, after they've gone into tremendous detail about exactly what happened. It's incredible to me how hard it is for people to truly understand that this has happened to them. Why that happens, I'm not entirely sure. Clearly, it's intended to be that way. And I think a lot of the reasons are fear. We as humans are scared about this. Why? We could go into a huge history lesson as to the times that both good aliens and bad aliens have come to Earth, which are extensively laid out in books like the Bible. Why it is that stuff's never brought up in church is beyond me, because I was raised a Lutheran, and as a kid, my God, did they lose me. But if they would have talked about aliens, also known as quote-unquote angels, good and bad, man, they would have had me hook, line, and sinker into church. It's laid out thoroughly in the book they base their entire religion off of, the Bible. So I don't know, if you run into a pastor, might want to slip him a hint. Hey, why don't you throw out some of this stuff? The kids will love it, because it's cool stuff as a kid. It's fascinating stuff, aliens. But nonetheless, there are stories of the bad type coming to Earth and doing awful things with people. And those are highly accurate, and it still happens. And I'm not going to take this segment to go into what type does this, what type does that, because a big misunderstanding people have with quote-unquote aliens is thinking that they're all one type, thinking they're all the Greys or reptilians or whatever species they want to think the aliens are. Okay, let's look at the term alien. Means not from this Earth. That's a pretty freaking broad area, isn't it? I mean, it's the rest of the entire damn universe. So to think there's one species or one quote-unquote breed of alien doing this is absolutely ridiculous. How many are there? I don't know for sure. I heard some report that the government has identified 57 or 58 species. I'd say, yeah, at least, I'd imagine. I'm sure there's countless numbers. But some of them do not have humanity's best intentions at heart. And I want that to be clear, and a lot of times that is what causes people's fear. And that's my guess as to why most memories are erased, why this is usually done very quietly, many times without the person themselves really truly understanding or knowing that, what's going on to them. But a lot of the emails I get have the fear question in them. And usually people are wanting to know, how do I get over my fear of the aliens? Well, it's a good question. And I'll take this opportunity to answer it publicly as well as I possibly can. And I think the first and most important rule as to how to get over your fear of aliens is to realize that each individual has to do it their own way. There is no magic trick as to how to do it. And it is very hard to work through. I remember at one point in my rash of abductions, and I can't even place a finger on what month it was of last year. I want to say November, something like that. And this was the point where I was being visited by UFOs, and every night if I went out, it got to the point where I could say, come show yourself, and they did. It was pretty wild. I even got to the point where other people would ask me to send them to their part of the world, and I tried it. I didn't know if it would work or not at the time. There was something like 10 different countries they went to in response to me asking to go show themselves to these people who've asked to see them. So if you ask and if you're patient, they'll come. No doubt about it. But during my experiences, I wanted to, I guess I began to feel withdrawn from humanity and from society in general. Because I really got interested in this. I really got into this. I spent a lot of time thinking about this topic. I spent a lot of nights being abducted, with very freaking dramatic things happening. But there came a point where when it's telepathy, it's really hard to know a lot of times for people what they're being told through telepathic thoughts and what's their imagination. And this was something I struggled with for a while too, until I began to try to, I would ask about the pineal gland or something like that, which is a small gland in the brain, which is an incredible thing that we'll go into later. But it would say certain hormones that would get put out of the pineal gland. And then I would go, I don't recall them at this particular time, but I would go, Wikipedia, and word for word, these are hormones that I couldn't begin to pronounce ahead of time. They were dead on the money. So through methods like that, you can find out the telepathy you're getting is accurate, because there's no other way I would have known that. I did this 10, 15, 20 times before I was sold, believe me. But I either got the telepathic message or the general idea myself that I wanted to walk out into the woods. My opinion is it was a message to go out in the woods. And I live in Colorado, USA, by the Rocky Mountains, and can drive to the mountains real easily. And usually during my abduction experiences, I would drive around. And I guess I shouldn't say during my abduction experiences. Abductions happened in that period of time, which is hard to understand because it's not always beam me up to a ship like we think it is. It's interdimensional type of deal, which is really hard to wrap your head around. But I would drive around to certain locations to be able to see UFOs or be able to see beings on the ground even a couple times. Anyway, I got to the point where I decided, screw it, I'm going to walk out in the woods because I really wanted to do this. And talk about fear. This would always be at 2, 3 in the morning. I had horrible insomnia at the time I was going through all this. And it's still kind of there, not as bad as it was at its peak. But imagine being out in the wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, driving down a remote road, parking, with no one around, obviously. No one around for, I don't know, where the closest person was, at least a mile away. And just walking out into the woods down a hiking trail is usually what I did. Talk about learning to overcome fear. That was one of the scariest freaking things I've ever had to do, but it was well worth it. Why? Because of the freedom I felt once I got out there, half a mile away from my car even. And if you think that's a little scary, yeah, at that point I asked them to come. There was one point where I got an implant adjusted, I guess is the best word for it, out in the woods, and to hear them running around you while you're half a mile away from your car, which is parked a mile away from anybody. Yeah, that's a little scary.